I've got chills now telling you the story.
I asked myself the question, what does Toronto have that we don't have here in Ottawa? And they have an NHL team, and I said, well, maybe we could get one for Ottawa, and if we do, maybe our company should be the bidder.
This is never going to happen. Ottawa's too small.
I did not think in a million years they would get the team.
There never was a moment where we doubted that it wasn't possible. If it had been, we certainly wouldn't have pursued it as hard and as passionately as we did. We were a small group that really believed that A, we could do it, and B, the city could support a team.
The Ottawa Senators were a hockey club, an amateur hockey club back in the day, which was essentially founded in the early 1890s. The Stanley Cup was awarded in and around the same time, 1893, by the Governor General, who was here at the time. His name was Sir Frederick Arthur. He was the Earl of Derby, and he was Lord Stanley from England. And Ottawa was an amateur club in the area. Because the trophy was originated geographically here, it only made sense that a group of amateurs from the city would at least be one of the teams competing for amateur supremacy. Nobody had any idea of the scope of how it was going to grow. So as it did, very quickly may I add, Ottawa continued to play a huge role in the foundation of the success not only of hockey here in the city of Ottawa, but in the amateur ranks in Canada, and then ultimately professionally, when pretty much all hockey players by 1908, 1910 were acknowledged to have been paid, and the whole amateur mantra, if you will, around the trophy was losing its entire luster, and it was becoming a professional trophy.
You know, the Ottawa Senators have a great history in the National Hockey League. They won 9 Stanley Cups, although there's some debate that there might be a couple more, so maybe they won 11. And it has a great history and tradition. I knew Frank Finnegan, who played for the Ottawa Senators back in the 1920s, and I think scored in one of the Stanley Cup winning games.
The Ottawa Senators were first and foremost, or certainly along the lines with the Montreal Wanderers, as being one of the major competitors for that trophy year in and year out. And from sports, we know this: sports drives the market. Sports drives interest. Sports drives passion. It drives, and ultimately that can drive dollars. And at the end of the day, what they discovered years ago was that it was a good thing to have a professional sports team, or even in the early days, a top-ranked amateur team. So the Senators, from a very significant historical perspective, even from a city of Ottawa perspective, had a huge impact back in the day. The stock market crashed in December of 29. It's a fairly significant world event. So it had impact the world over, obviously, and not the least of which was on professional sports. The NHL at the time was a thriving 2-division, 10-team circuit. The Ottawa Senators played in the Canadian division. They were Stanley Cup champions in 27. The market crashed in 29, and much as so many other markets in North America were, and so many cities were affected, pro sports were dramatically affected. And the finances of the ownership at that time, as they did in other markets, fell into unfortunately bankruptcy, disfavor, ran afoul of a number of very difficult scenarios where it just became impossible to run the franchise. They suspended operations for a year, came back, and then decided at that point that they were unable to continue. And then they sold their interests to an ownership group in St. Louis in 1934, where they operated as one season as a team called the St. Louis Eagles. And at the conclusion of 34-35, that franchise ceased to be.
Well, it was in the days before cell phones, so the only place really to get peace and quiet, even in that day, in that time, late 80s, I guess, was to get in my car, which was a Saab, and drive up and down the Queensway here in Ottawa. And one time I was doing that, and I thought, we should try and do something new and different. And I thought, what would that be? And I asked myself the question, what does Toronto have that we don't have here in Ottawa? They have an NHL team, and I said, well, maybe we could get one for Ottawa, and if we do, maybe our company should be the bidder. Well, it was Terrace Investments Limited, which was the first parent company of the Ottawa Senators, and it was a core group of individuals led by myself, together with Cyril Leader, who's the president of the Ottawa Senators now, and Randy Sexton, who's with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and a really great group of young executives.
Really, my first job as a CA was working for Bruce Firestone in real estate development, and worked for Bruce for about almost 3 years.
I had finished my MBA, had coached at US College, and came back to Ottawa. Took a job with a young entrepreneur named Bruce Firestone at a company called Terrace Investments.
And when we were working together, we played hockey on a regular basis, so we had a regular game of pickup every Saturday morning.
After one game at the old Lions Arena here in Ottawa, I said to Cyril and Randy, just hang back and let's spend a few minutes after everybody leaves.
He proposed the idea at that point that the league expands every now and then, and hadn't expanded in a while, and they will probably expand soon. And why don't we take up the charge to pursue a franchise for Ottawa?
And I said, and if they do expand and Ottawa's big enough for a team, we ought to go after one with Terrace Investments Limited. And Randy Sexton right away got up and said, yeah, let's do it. I mean, he's an MBA from Clarkson and a hockey guy, and he was really super enthusiastic. But Cyril's a little bit more cautious. And he's a CA, chartered accountant, and he said, well, wait a second, how much is this going to cost?
But I guess the accountant in me said, better do some work here before we get too carried away. And it didn't take too long at my end, having done some review of what the teams were doing, the new arenas they were building, to figure out that Bruce was right, that the city could support a team, and that we should be chasing after a team for Ottawa.
Well, the first thing in mind was, wow, we have a chance to win a Stanley Cup. Wouldn't it be a cool thing to have your name on the Stanley Cup and bring the Stanley Cup back to Ottawa, its rightful home?
Terrace formally announced its plans at a news conference in early September.
We were in Hamilton at the time, and you had called me in the afternoon and said, we just got a fax from
Terrace Investments.
Terrace Investments, exactly. And have you heard of these guys? They want to start an NHL franchise. They want to apply for an NHL franchise. And we both kind of chuckled on the phone and said, no, I've not heard of them.
Well, we felt, because we were a real estate company, the first step is to get a site where we could build a new building. And we looked at a number of locations in Ottawa, some of them downtown, some of them in the east end of Ottawa, some in what was Hull, Quebec, now Gatineau, Quebec, and one location where Scotiabank Place is today, which is in the west end of Ottawa. Is that right? It's 12 miles. So we're about 12 miles from the downtown core.
I think they've done a great job, Brian. They've done their homework well, and that's really impressed me. They have to be taken seriously.
I think that the bid that we put forward was professionally by far and away the best bid in terms of when you look at the book that we prepared. It was about that thick, and details on from an economic perspective on the region, how the team would operate, why it would operate successfully. They did a tremendous job, the guys, in preparing this.
Well, I mean, we weren't a very big company at the time. It was only 14 people that worked for Terrace Investments. So, we all did a little bit of everything. So, my role ranged from helping recruit sponsors to help with the public campaign.
But as we started to gain momentum, obviously more and more people came into the fold. So the biggest thing I did, I worked with Cyril to generate corporate support and community support, and my primary responsibilities were really to get meetings, one-on-one private meetings with the owners and the GMs in the league to make our pitch, to build relationships, to try and influence them to be comfortable with us enough to grant us a franchise.
I owned a bar at the time on Fisher and Baseline here in Ottawa called the Original Six, right down the road from St. Pius High School. And I was approached in the calendar year 1989 saying that a formal bid was being put in place for an expansion franchise, and they were going to sell season ticket lots based on a $25 or a $40 or $50 deposit. You could secure at least the option to secure a season ticket.
Support from the corporate community has been overwhelming, and the fans are excited. Hundreds entered a promotional table hockey tournament. As of June 1st, over 10,000 season tickets have been sold to people who put down a $25 non-refundable deposit.
So we had been thinking about it from 1987 to 1990. We had been buying some land, about 600 acres of land in Canada, which is now part of Ottawa. And so we announced it to the community, and right away there was both surprise, delight, and skepticism.
There were people who were overjoyed, excited, and thought this is going to happen, it's going to be a great thing. And there was other people from the very beginning just said, this is a joke.
Yeah.
This is never going to happen. Ottawa's too small.
I had no qualms at all about telling anybody that I didn't see a hope in hell that they would get a franchise. I thought it was on a total wing and a prayer.
You know, not a lot of people really, here believed that Ottawa could support a team. They didn't really believe in the city and didn't believe in themselves. And we certainly had a different view. We thought that the city was growing up, was being less reliant on government. That the tech sector was becoming more important, and it was growing. At the time, was 900,000 people, and we could see clearly that within a short period of time, we're going to be over 1 million people in the metropolitan area. So there was a lot of skepticism, and the media weren't kind. Asking all the tough questions and just not believing that this bid was real. They thought it was more of a real estate play than it was a real bid for an NHL team.
But I can tell you right now that skepticism ran supreme in this area. I think there couldn't have been 20% of the populace gave that organization a snowball's chance in hell of getting a franchise.
Oh, they said Ottawa was a government town, it could never support a franchise. They said the Ottawa Nationals of WHA failed, why would the NHL? Ottawa's too small, why would the NHL come here? Ottawa's Canada, why would they come here? Who are you guys? Firestone's 35, Sexton and Leader are 30 years old. Who are you guys?
When we heard that, some of the American conglomerates that were putting in bids, and the fact that the Hamilton bid with Copps Coliseum, you got to remember, this is only a few years removed from the incredible success of the '87 Canada Cup. That's the Wayne Gretzky, Mario Lemieux show. And that building was electric. That absolutely galvanized the country. And so they put a bid in, supported by Tim Hortons. Are you kidding me? How are they not going to get a franchise?
Okay, here's something we got to get over if we really want to get the franchise. And again, I think just a determination and a passion by everybody involved that really wanted to see this through and thought it was the right thing to do and the right thing to get our own personal support behind. And secondly, I think just Bruce's leadership and his drive. He was really pushing us and pushing the group to go forward, not give up, and don't back down. And that really was was a rallying cry for our group. And I think the more people came out and said it can't be done, I think that just hardened our resolve and made us want to do it even more.
It didn't really affect me. I would come into the office and I'd see everybody slumped like this, body language was very negative, and I would get everybody together every couple of months and I would say, we have to keep going. So could everybody stop reading the newspapers and the media attention was quite negative at that point. I said, just stop reading if it's upsetting because you have to do your job.
One of the things you realize in life is anytime you try and do something great, and bringing an NHL hockey team to a city is a great accomplishment. The opposition and the naysayers will always make many, many more times the noise than those who are quietly supporting.
We were very focused on what we had to achieve. We fundamentally believed that we could accomplish our goal, and we did our best to convince the cynics, but we used and worked with the enthusiasts to build momentum for our bid.
Well, first of all, you have to recognize it's a small club of about, in that time, 21 teams, and I thought it was pretty important to meet with each of the owners and the president of the National Hockey League. The president of the National Hockey League was John Ziegler, And so I went down to New York and I met with John, and then I went and did a tour of NHL cities and introduced myself and told them all kinds of things about me and about Terrace and about Ottawa. And we felt it was a little bit like trying to be mayor of a city, only instead of having to go after thousands or tens of thousands of voters, you're really after 21 or 22.
Well, there was the public process and the private process. The public process was a very high profile. Hockey, NHL hockey in Canada, as you can imagine, had a very high public profile both with the community and with the media. And that was a process. We had to fill out applications. We had to deliver certain types of capabilities. We had to prove we could sell season tickets and get corporate sponsorship. The private side was the ongoing lobbying and the building of the relationship with the Board of Governors, who were essentially the owners, with the league executive and with the hockey people, the general managers and the assistant GMs, so that collectively everybody in another NHL organization felt comfortable that we as owners in Ottawa and Ottawa as a city-supported franchise were worthy of being in the NHL.
And so I was approached in '89 and told they were putting a bid in. And then as they did, and it was accepted, that the bid was going to be accepted and discussed and disseminated and whatnot, that subsequent to that, they were invited to come down to West Palm Beach and make their case in 1990. And I was there by then also secured by the Senators to go down and be part of the entourage. There was 150 of us that went down.
It's one of those days that you remember just about every detail. We were at the hotel, the Breakers Hotel in Florida, and we didn't even expect that while we were there we would hear. We thought we were going down to make a presentation, we'd come home, there'd be more questions, there might be some more due diligence. It might take some time to award a franchise.
Take, I'm telling you, and this will be true. Ottawa's a place to
We had made a presentation. We knew we had made some great points. We knew we had good momentum. We knew we believe we're going to be successful, but until you actually hear the word, we're going to grant you a franchise, you never really know for sure.
I think there was certainly those who were close to the organization, those who were covering the team. I think there was a belief that, yeah, this was going to happen. The naysayers can go away eventually, and they will go away eventually, and yes, this will come to fruition. I mean, you couldn't help but get caught up in the excitement that was building from within. And certainly from West Palm Beach, December 6, 1990, or whenever it was, it just took off from there.
I think for some of the media who are new to this, who are new to our bid, you can see by the tremendous supporters that we have here today how much enthusiasm there is for NHL hockey in Ottawa. The enthusiasm for NHL hockey.
We'd made our presentation the day before. I really felt that day that we would be called back in for a second round of questioning.
And on the 6th, we were just hanging around the hotel. There was a bunch of supporters down there, 125. And we got a call from the NHL that to get our group of 5 presenters together, that they wanted to see us within a couple hours.
As you can imagine, the tension and the anxiety was fairly high, so Bruce went for a jog. Jim Durrell, at the time the mayor, was out walking on the golf course.
And they said the Board of Governors have requested we be there at 1:15.
There was a scramble to find Bruce because he was out running, so we found Bruce, got him back.
They came to get us, and before we left, I said, you know what, guys, we're going to get this franchise. And Jim Durrell said, we're going to get the franchise.
They took us, NHL security took us in this old hotel that we were in to the basement, and we were there in the Breakers in Palm Beach, in the basement. There was garbage all over the place. The pipes were leaking on us, and the prep kitchen was down there. And I looked around, and there was our team, our bid team, and I said, whoa, this doesn't look very good.
We're stepping over bags of potatoes. It's really quite dreary. And I remember Jim Durrell saying to me, Randy, I don't think this is the way they treat the winners.
At that moment, they did not believe they were going to be successful. But that didn't mean it was over for them. They started immediately thinking about the next bid for the next expansion.
Absolutely.
So I said to the group, it doesn't look very good. If we haven't been successful, we'll thank the National Hockey League for the opportunity to be a bidder. And then we'll have our own press conference, and in a true Canadian kind of fashion, we'll say, well, we weren't successful today, but there'll be another winter meeting next year, and we're going to come back.
Ended up leading us into this big grand ballroom, and there was 5 of us positioned in this ballroom. And again, we didn't know what it was about. We didn't know they'd made a decision. Just said, wait here and someone will come and get you. And while they were doing that, they brought down the group from Tampa Bay. So we met Phil Esposito and his group met us in that ballroom.
And he starts to scream and shout and high-five his members, we're in, we're in. And of course, we had the opposite emotion. He said, Randy, I had a member of the Board of Governors tell me last night, it's Ottawa for sure and one other team, and if we're in the same room with you, we're in.
And we went into that conference room, and there are all the governors, and Marcel Lebeau came up to me. He was the owner of the Quebec Nordiques, which have now become the Avalanche. And he came up to me and said, Félicitations, mon ami, and gave me a big hug and a handshake. And I thought he was congratulating us for a good try. And then I go to the front of the room, and there's John Ziegler and Phil Esposito, who was fronting the Tampa Bay bid.
Board of Governors today have granted conditional franchises. Beginning in the 1992-93 season, to the applicants representing the City of Ottawa.
People often ask me, what was the, outside of the birth of your kids and those types of things, the most memorable thing in your life? And there's no question was the day we won the franchise. It's something you never forget.
It's fantastic. I'm speechless. I really am. I'm so fired up. This is the biggest thing that has ever happened to the City of Ottawa, other than being named the capital in 1857.
It was an incredible lifetime experience, and that particular day is a day that and a memory I'll take to my grave.
11 cities said they were interested during the summer. But being interested is one thing. Having what it takes and convincing the league is another. 8 cities brought their hopes to the meetings in Florida. Today, John Ziegler announced the league would expand to Ottawa and Tampa.
There was obviously a wild celebration. All the group from Ottawa that was there celebrated that night, and I think all through the next day, and came home on the Sunday, and that's really how the franchise was won.
There was also disappointment on this day. Hamilton, bolstered by a late entry of Tim Donut Limited, fell short, a development that caught everyone by surprise.
Nobody knew that in front of the Board of Governors, all you had to do was not blink. You literally had not to blink. You had to say, no problem. I've got my $25 million down payment. No problem. I'll make that next $25 million down payment. No problem. I got it covered. We're in. Hamilton blinked. Tim Hortons blinked. Boom, they're out. Bruce Firestone didn't blink.
And it was a wonderful moment. I think Randy must have had a 3-foot vertical jump. He was pretty excited, and Cyril was excited, our whole team was excited, and it was a great moment.
We wanted to bring back the Senators over 2 years ago. Myself and a couple of my young staff, Cyril Leader and Randy Sexton and I, thought that it might be time to bring the Ottawa Senators back after nearly 60 years.
I did not think in a million years they would get the team. When they did, I mean, everybody's brains were racing fast forward for sure to try and figure out how's this going to work. We don't have a rink, So there was some interesting times, to say the least.
Even after the franchise was granted, I remember getting calls to the radio station for who say, "Yeah, they got the franchise, but you'll never see a game of hockey."
The next day when we came back to Ottawa, Phil Esposito called me from Tampa, and he said, just had a great call from the governor of the state of Florida. I said, well, tell me what was said. And he said, congratulations on bringing the NHL to Florida. This is a great moment, and we're looking forward to working with you. And so Phil said, how was the reaction back in Ontario? And I said, well, we didn't get a call from the Premier of the province of Ontario, Mr. Ray, congratulating us. We got a lawsuit instead from the government of Ontario. They were opposed to us building the Palladium or Scotiabank Place, and so they took us to the Ontario Municipal Board.
Lowest moment would have been really during that OMB hearing, when when there was a real risk that everything we'd fought so hard for could be lost.
The OMB hearing was nothing short, frankly, of a farce. In our country today, democracy is a wonderful thing. But as always, there are limits of sensibility in democracy, and the fact that one or two people could stop something as major as an NHL hockey team, an arena that's now been granted, from being built. There was huge costs, and it was all based ostensibly on, could you navigate the Carp River?
The environmental people got up in arms because the little creek that runs all the way to Carp, which is about the width of this table and has had 4 fish in it in the last 100 years, they couldn't even get a canoe down there.
They had to make sure it was not a navigable, is that the word, navigable?
That's so close to
navigable waterway,
and
it
almost
was
a real word.
Somebody in hip waders walking
Who's
through.
in a canoe?
Well,
one guy's on the shore in the hip waders, another guy's in a canoe, and the telltale sign was going to be, if he can get the canoe through, then it's a navigable waterway. So like people are watching this idiot in a canoe. Is it? Oh, he's hung up on some reeds. Fabulous. Oh no, he's found a clear patchy. Yeah. It's like the whole thing hinged on one doofus in a canoe.
We had a 13-and-a-half-week hearing. It's pretty grueling. I was on the stand for 3.5 days, and so, you know, in Florida there was a lot of support, and in Ontario, obviously, not quite the support we expected.
We were worried. We were real concerned that you know, the league was pretty adamant that we couldn't stay at the Civic Center forever, and that we needed a new arena, and you know, they weren't going to be patient forever. So we knew we had to get that site approved and get on with developing this building, get on with building the new arena. So, and there was a real risk there at that time that wasn't going to get approved.
I think we spent about $2.5 million of our money on legal and planning, you know, costs for that hearing, and you know, and out of that hearing, we did get approval, thankfully, for Scotiabank Place and the 100 acres for that. But the other 500 acres that we were hoping to develop as well, we didn't get approval for that. And we also had to build the Palladium interchange. If you go out to Scotiabank Place, there's an interchange there built with private money, and I still think to this day it's the only interchange in Ontario built by the private sector. That was about a $30 million cost. So there were a lot of you know, negatives that came out of the hearing, but the positive is that we got the most important thing, which was Scotiabank Place.
There were political hurdles put in front of this that never should have been put in front of this for political reasons outside of Ottawa, that still to this day I believe are shameful. Yeah. This is the only organization that had to spend $33 million building its own highway, and once it was built they had to donate it back to the province. That's never happened before, and the Senators have never been repaid for that.
The only way, some of those difficult days, the only way we could get through it was sticking together and believing we're not backing down from anybody or anything. We're going to make this happen. After Rod Bryden got involved on the financing side, that helped us take care of that difficult issue, because without him it wouldn't have happened. So we were a team, and like any great team, at some time different people rise to the occasion and take a leadership role, and that's how we function.
So had we failed on that, you know, we'd be cheering for the Senators, but they'd be playing probably in Anaheim.
That was probably his biggest thing, not the least of which was they had to ice a team. They iced a team within 2 years. 1992, October 8th, they're starting at the Civic Center.
When we flew from New Jersey to Minneapolis and then Minneapolis to Winnipeg, the expansion draft was taking place at that time, and so this is before the cell phones, proliferation of cell phones, and so I got on a payphone at the airport terminal in Minnesota and called my family to see if they had heard about the expansion draft. I couldn't get a hold of anyone. I eventually got a hold of one buddy, and my buddy said, yeah, they had the draft, but I didn't hear your name. I think you're good. And I told my wife the information. We flew into Winnipeg. We went through the customs area, and the gentleman who takes your customs form, he said, how do you feel about getting picked by the Ottawa Senators? I said, what? And that's how I found out I got picked by the Senators, is from the custom agent in Winnipeg Airport.
Well, it was pretty exciting atmosphere because the hockey fans in Ottawa were thrilled to have an NHL team in their city. And I experienced it when I went from Atlanta to Calgary. We were just embraced by the whole community because they wanted an NHL team. And so when I experienced that again in Ottawa, it was very similar to 1980, but it was just great to be recognized everywhere you went as a member of the Ottawa Senators. And you know, obviously our record wasn't very good in the first year, but the fans, the hockey fans, they didn't care. They were just happy to have an NHL team that they could cheer for.
We knew we had to build through the draft, which is still the best way to build your team today. And we knew that we were going to take our lumps We clearly believed the City of Ottawa and the Canadian market understood the need to do so.
Once I discovered that I was going to be a member of the new expansion Ottawa Senators, you put in your mind that you want to make it a good experience. And so when I came to training camp, I was looking forward to being an Ottawa Senator.
The surprise guest was 85-year-old Frank Finnegan.
Frank played for the original Ottawa Senators in the 30s. He was a wonderful, wonderful mentor to us. He was a wonderful inspiration to us.
He actually came with us, and he was quite elderly. He came with us to Palm Beach, and I remember the night before we actually got the team, Mr. Finnegan, with his large hockey hands, he still had the big hockey hands, even though I think he was late 80s, early 90s. He said to Mr. Ziegler, "Now you be sure to give those boys in Ottawa a fair shake, Mr. Ziegler," and John said, of course, he would do that.
He passed away a few months before that opening night. So one of the ways we wanted to honor Frank was to retire his number on that opening night, because he wasn't there physically, but certainly he was there with us, and it was one of the things, again, that we remember.
I know when Frank passed, he had a warm heart knowing that the Sens were back in Ottawa. I remember asking our ticket guy for 4 tickets that I wanted to randomly give away to people in the community. I stopped and got gas in Bell's Corners. The young teenage boy who was serving me recognized me, chatted it up. I gave him a ticket. The look on his face was incredible. I did that 3 or 4 times during the day.
Long before aviation and a century prior to the advent of television, a country and its pastime came together here in a place which will again be a setting for an historic
One of the
mix
things
of
that made it so
society
spectacular
and
was
sport.
that it was at the Civic Center. And the Civic Center at the time was small, it was 10,000. So what you lacked in terms of size and numbers of people, you made up for in closeness, and there was a real feeling in the air of accomplishment.
A city steeped in the tradition of everything we are in Canada now rightfully reclaims a place within the NHL. After a 58-year hiatus, the Senate is back in session.
I think there was a lot of excitement, obviously, because NHL was in Ottawa, and there's a lot of hockey fans, obviously, in this community, both in Ottawa and across the river and in Gatineau. And so there was a lot of excitement, for sure, that this community had an NHL team. So that was kind of fun.
I just remember sitting in this tiny little booth at the Civic Center, and I remember just looking at Gord, and we almost said the same thing, even though we never actually said the words. I looked at Gord, he looked at me, and it was like, holy crap, this is real. And that's really the first time where I was like, okay, here we go. And at that time, I don't think, again, that I was old enough to really understand how personally it would change our lives and our careers. But it was exciting.
It's showtime!
The opening night obviously was a real gratifying and special night for everybody involved with the franchise. So, you just if you think about it, we'd started working on and planning in earnest, I mean in a significant way, in 1987, to bring an NHL team to Ottawa. So it was over 5 years later, this team finally takes the ice and plays its first game.
It's difficult to describe the work and the effort and the pain and the stress and the elation that you go through to make something like this happen. And opening night was kind of the coming out party, kind of the crescendo for everybody in the organization to have an opportunity to feel proud about the work they had done, to feel great about what was happening in the city of Ottawa, what was happening in our great country of Canada with another NHL expansion team. So that night captured all of those emotions, all of that feeling, and it was a night that I think everybody who was in attendance that night will remember for a very, very long time.
The city, they were licking their chops for that first game, and so for it to finally happen, the players couldn't wait for it to happen, but more importantly, the fan base here. If you had a ticket, that was a bonus. If you didn't have a ticket, you were still glued to the TV set because that was the first game.
Workhorses. Long shot for Wall, who's back in. Smale from a counter at 1945. This game is in
It had been about 2 years of 16 to 20-hour days nonstop, round the clock, and to have it all come together in our hometown, in our city, to prove all the naysayers wrong and beat the Habs, who we knew we'd have a long-time rival with, was an incredible lifetime feeling.
I'm sure, and I know there were times where they really thought they were done, but they just couldn't conceive of the possibility that they would quit.
I think they truly believed that they had a city behind them, to be honest with you, and it's
that it would work.
Exactly,
And
it was the old adage that the little engine that could, you know, and they could.
When you bring that type of mentality to the table, you're not losing many battles. And they rolled up their sleeves and they put together an absolute spectacular business plan. It invigorated the business community. It unified this city, the likes of which I don't think we'd seen.
Well, a city would not have a major league presence, frankly. You wouldn't have a center like Scotiabank. You wouldn't have the world-class entertainment you see that comes through here weekly. You wouldn't have a foundation like the Sens Foundation that gives millions of dollars back to charities. Kids wouldn't have their local heroes.
You know, I just said, well, I had a great career. It's time to retire and get on with life.
Myself and Brad Marsh and Sean Donovan and some of the others are a part of our alumni association, and so we do stuff in the Ottawa area that raise funds for different charities that goes towards helping people in our community, and I think that's very important, and I'm pleased to be a part of that.
I never understood at the very beginning, I never understood what kind of a massive, huge magnet NHL hockey is, for not only for business, but for emotion, for civic pride. As we've all gotten older, I think we've all come to understand because we live in the middle of it. And my children, his children, they live in this environment, they get to benefit from it. And it makes our city different, it makes our city more vibrant, it makes our city a whole bunch of things it just wasn't before.
Nobody really thought we could do it except us.
We were a major city, a big league city without a hockey team, but I think we're even more of a cosmopolitan and an international city with an NHL team. And I hope people think of the Senators as a real good corporate citizen, that we try to do right by the community that's been so good to us, and that's how we try to repay the thanks of the community, is doing what we can to make Ottawa a better place.
I've been incredibly fortunate and blessed, quite honestly, to have been involved in the process. Having done it with Bruce and Rod and Cyril and Bernie Ash and Mark Buno and Jeff Kyle and Jim Steele and all the other people that some of whom I grew up with us from a very early age, to work together to make something like this happen, to leave a legacy in our community, is something I'm extremely grateful for and will be very proud of till the day I die.
I remember standing on the ice on opening night, and the arena could only hold 10,000 people. I bet you we had 12,000 people there. But standing there, the fans in Ottawa and the fans in that building that night gave the team about a 5 or 6 minute standing ovation, which is a long time. And I was standing there, and it just went on and on and on. And I realized that the fans in that building and the community weren't really applauding the team or me or anybody else. They were applauding themselves. It was the fact that I feel that the community felt, particularly at that time, that we have come together to do this together. It was a great moment.